Father of mercies, through the death and sorrow of the world, to the resurrection and
The film opens with our lead, Rick, witnessing his mother shoot herself. Scenes cut to 3 years later, in which Rick wakes up at his friend's house and goes to his work site at a billionaire's mansion, which is being reconstructed by the contractors he works for. For work, he has to manually push around a tri-wheel buggy. He ends up poking himself with the handles and puncturing his abdomen. He finds the house's manager, Antoinette, and asks her for a first aid kit. She takes him inside the house and provides him the necessary aid to treat his own wound. Rick becomes curious and walks the hallways. He peeps inside a room and spots a wallet with cash in it. Since he's broke and needy, he takes a $20 bill from that wallet and tries sneaking out. Unfortunately, an old man behind the desk witnesses this and stops him. Antoinette also shows up. Before Antoinette can berate him, the old man calls Rick to his desk. He happens to be the billionaire owner of the house. He's curious to know why Rick only took out $20 instead of stealing the whole wallet. Rick confesses that he was robbed this morning and only needed money to return home. The billionaire, George, gives him all the money from the wallet and asks him to consider it an advance payment. Rick returns to his friend's home after work, who also works at the construction site beside him. The friend, Jeremy, asks Rick if he becomes a billionaire, what he would do. Rick is still stuck on his ex-girlfriend, Tanya, and wishes to treat her well with his billions. The next day at work, Jeremy is curious to know what they're building outside the mansion. Antoinette approaches Rick and brings him to George at the food table, where Rick takes a look at food he's never seen before in his life. George asks Rick to strike a deal with him before he dies. If Rick eats one meal off of his dead body, he will pass on his billions of net worth to him since he doesn't have a family of his own and wishes to help a needy person such as him. Rick is curious to know why he's been selected, so George passes a very implicit remark about him being constitutional enough to deal with the stresses that will come along with the massive wealth. Rick ends up striking the deal. He returns home, where Jeremy has thrown a party. Rick comes across Tanya there but doesn't get to talk to her, as Jeremy sweeps her away from him. He sits outside on the porch where Tanya shows up. Suddenly, Jeremy gets into a fight with a dude. Rick tries to take Jeremy to the side, but Jeremy ends up pushing him on the floor and lashing out at him for feeding off of him. This causes Rick to tear up and call other friends for a place to stay. When no one takes him in, Jeremy offers him to be a drug mule for him, but Rick is skeptical. To his savior, George's driver shows up with a secretive invitation and a suit for Rick. He waits for him outside in his car and drives him back to the mansion where Antoinette awaits him with the contract. Before becoming George's sole heir, he must indulge every crumb of the meal served on George's naked corpse. He must also keep the event a secret, or else he'll lose everything. Rick reads the contract and moves on to the dining table, where George's corpse is placed on the table. While Antoinette covers the corpse's face, Rick starts having doubts and wants to back out. Antoinette tempts him by counting all the things he can do with the billions he'll inherit. He gives in and places his knees on a stool to eat from the corpse's chest. At first, gooey and slimy food is presented to him on plates that are placed over the corpse's chest. The certain type of food makes him want to barf. The bees buzzing around the corpse also makes things worse. After a full 10-course meal, all of his crumbs are served on the corpse's chest without any plate. Sick to his stomach, Rick just closes his eyes and eats them with his hands. Antoinette further makes him read out loud an enchantment spell to fulfill the contract. The spell makes him tipsy and nauseous, due to which he struggles to reach the bed and fall asleep right away. He dreams about being submerged in water. When he wakes up and gets out of the bed, he sees the same cash George gave him from the wallet, but with Rick's initials engraved on the gold cash holder. When he walks down, a very rare bottle of wine from the 17th century has been placed for him. A servant stares him down and runs away. Antoinette apologizes to Rick on the servant's behalf. revealing the staff is not allowed to look the owner in the eyes. However, she makes a dominating eye contact to project she's an exception. Currently, Rick is clueless about what to do, so she gives him the black card carrying all the billions within and asks him to take it out for a spin. He takes out one of many cars from the garage, along with the driver, and visits Jeremy's place to pack up his stuff. He pays his half of the rent, which surprises Jeremy. When he walks outside, he's stopped by Tanya. He implies that he's rich now and still has feelings for her before asking her out on a date. She finds him even creepier and refuses his proposal. Rick stops by a bar to drink, where the bartender treats him with respect the second he sees the black card. When Rick returns home, he notes that his nose is bleeding. The plot twist unveils suddenly when the ghost of a murdered woman starts choking him. He goes into a state of dreaming in which the woman drowns him. When he wakes up, he rushes to Antoinette to demand an explanation for what just happened. She finally brings him to reality and points out there's always a catch, as nothing comes easily. Furthermore, she enlightens him with an ancient book George was fond of. In it, George read a story about a family from the 17th century that found a way to wash off their sins before dying and preventing going to hell. The ritual requires someone to feed off of the dead man's corpse in order to transfer the dead man's sins to the eater. Since George feared going to hell because of his sin, he gave Rick his billions in exchange for eating away his sins and sending him to heaven with a clean slate. Rick is now forever cursed by his sins. Perplexed, he visits the old church for help, but soon realizes he'll lose the billions if he talks about this. He returns to his mansion and forces Antoinette to tell him everything before he fires her. She now shows him the physical proof, which confirms George killed his own wife for having an affair. Since the sins have transferred onto him, he will never get rid of the wife's ghost. He goes back to the church and confesses about the murder as if he had committed it himself. The wife's ghost appears once again, but Father's prayers make her disappear and relieve Rick temporarily. He expresses his gratitude and drives away. He starts living the lavish lifestyle. One day, Tanya calls him and asks him to help Jeremy, but he no longer cares for those peasants. At night while drinking, a new ghost haunts him from behind the couch. When he runs looking for Antoinette, he sees another ghost with his face peeled off. Antoinette sits him down and breaks down that he did not only eat George's sins, but also those whose sins George had eaten to become a billionaire. This means he's in a chain of sin eaters with countless sins lingering over him. He tries to visit the father again, but he refuses to let him in his church. Rick returns home and has a meltdown. When he sleeps, he experiences a very vivid sleep paralysis and foams up in his mouth. The doctors resurrect him, luckily, and reveal that he died for a few minutes. This gives him an idea, which he discusses with Antoinette on the lawn. He decides to die the same way for a few minutes, during which he can pick a new sin eater and pass on the sins and wealth to him to break the chain without really dying. Antoinette supports him and suggests Jeremy as the next sin eater. While constantly seeing multiple ghosts, Rick refuses to involve his friend in this. When he later gets a call from Jeremy begging to help him pay off his debt collectors, Rick agrees to help him. Drunk and in a foggy state of mind, he enters his house and finds it ransacked. He believes the debt collectors have done that and takes out his gun. When he sees another ghost, he shoots him, but later realizes he's shot Tanya. His driver brings him back to the mansion, who's now severely traumatized and convinced to involve Jeremy. When Jeremy arrives, he shares with Rick that the debt collectors killed Tanya. Rick doesn't tell him the truth and strikes the same offer as George struck with him. The greedy Jeremy takes the offer without investigating it. In his absence, the doctor is called upon to stop his heart for 4 minutes. Rick gambles with his life, as he doesn't know if Jeremy will make it or not. Soon the doctor slows his heartbeat and eventually stops it. Jeremy is brought to eat off of him, While Rick's spirit lingers in the spirit world, all the previous Sin Eater's curses haunt him, along with the newest addition, Tanya. He's saved by his mother's spirit, who helps him wake up. Antoinette reveals that his sins have been passed on, and he's officially broken the chain. Scenes cut to 3 months later, in which Rick is seen returning to his construction gig. Jeremy is seen getting haunted by all the sins of the predecessor Sin Eaters. Rick may have gotten rid of the previous curses, but Tanya's ghost still haunts her. Here, the film ends. I am sure you liked the story recap. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more amazing recaps like that.